Hoisting the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the 2015 season, obviously the top moment from the past decade, but what about the other moments? We're counting it down here from inside the Broncos Media Center. I'm Phil Milani alongside Matt Boyer and Eric Dalala. A lot of big moments from the past decade, maybe some that you forgot about. And let's go ahead. Let's just dive into this. Matt, give us your top five.
All right, you already said it. Super Bowl 50, obviously number one. Number two for me, Peyton Manning signing with the Denver Broncos as a free agent. 3, the Broncos beating the Patriots in 2013 to get to Super Bowl 48. This is not the Super Bowl year that they had won, but this is the first. That's the Super Bowl 48 year, so 2013. Manning sets the touchdown mark against the Texans. That is number 4 for me. And then Tim Tebow throwing to Demaryius Thomas to beat the Steelers in 2011. That is my number 5. So that's how I have it right now. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, some of these happened before I got here. So some of this is from an outside lens of how I viewed the Broncos at that time. So number 1, obviously, Super Bowl 50. Number 2, I think that's where I would rank Tim Tebow to Demaryius Thomas, just kind of the significance of that moment nationally, the end of kind of Tebow mania. Number 3, when Peyton Manning chose Denver, chose to come here as a free agent. Number 4, just for what it meant to the organization when Pat Bowlen and Champ Bailey went into the Hall of Fame this year. I don't think that can be understated how much that meant to the organization. And then number 5, when John Elway came back and resumed control of football operations. Tough time for the franchise, and I think that was the beginning of obviously a great decade.
Yeah, a lot of overlap from you guys here. I'll go through my list here real quick. Number 1, obviously, Super Bowl 50. Number 2, signing Peyton Manning. Number 3, Tim Tebow to DT. Number 4, Manning's 51st touchdown, setting the record against the Houston Texans. And then number 5, that 2013 AFC Championship. Guys, one that was at the top of most of our lists, near the top, was signing Peyton Manning. What did that mean to this organization?
It meant, 4 straight division titles. It meant, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl championship. I think that you could even tell, like, when he touched down that March, that people were tracking the plane, the crowd inside the team room when he was first introduced. I mean, you could feel the buzz. I think that set the tone for the entire decade, or the biggest successes of that decade was that moment in that day.
Yeah, and the fact that doesn't happen a whole lot, where a franchise quarterback is a free agent, able to choose their team, just kind of the national conversation about where is Peyton going to go. The fact that he chose Denver, that John Elway was able to say, hey, I know what it takes to get over the top late in my career. We can do the same thing here. Just meant, so I think even then you could tell it was going to be special, but I'm not sure you could predict that the Broncos were going to go to 2 Super Bowls. They were going to win 1. Peyton was going to win another MVP. I mean, it turned out better than probably most people could have even expected.
Yeah, probably the best 4-year stretch of success on the field for the Broncos there. Number 1 seed 3 of those 4 years on the AFC side. And this was just a good fit for him. I mean, they had a great defense, a lot of weapons. John Elway obviously able to relate quarterback to quarterback, and John Fox also a big part of that equation, so it made sense there. How about the Tim Tebow to Demaryius Thomas? I think everybody remembers where they were when that happened. Just what an incredible moment. The playoff rules had just changed.
Yeah, it was the very first overtime where we were going to see each team get the ball if a field goal was kicked. So that's what everybody was thinking of, and then Tim Tebow hits Demaryius Thomas, and he's just taken off towards the south end zone. I think that was a huge moment just because of what that team signified, because of, not only was it that game, but all the comebacks that they had that season with Tebow and that offense.
Right, yeah, that was just kind of the culmination of everything. And I think going into that game, there was kind of some doubt of, are the Broncos going to be able to hang with the Steelers here? Even though they're hosting the playoff game, and man, the first play of overtime, obviously things the next week kind of went south, but that moment stands as, probably one of the best of the decade, obviously, and, just how loud the stadium was at that moment.
Gosh.
Unbelievable.
And then that team just went on a miracle run where they were winning these games in such a bizarre fashion. And then, of course, the Tebow mania was exploding all across the country. So that was a miracle run there. Manning's 51st touchdown. That was huge. I mean, do you think that record will ever be broken? He ended up with 55.
It's so hard to... I think that the way we're seeing the passing game evolve in the NFL
Patrick Mahomes got close.
He did.
You're still 5 off, though.
Yeah. 5 is a lot.
It is.
Records are made to be broken. I mean, I think even Peyton would say that himself. So I think, while I do think it's going to be hard, I do think that the way the offenses are moving now, I think it definitely is in reach. But gosh, that season, I mean, it was incredible.
I mean, think how long it took for Marino's record to be broken by Peyton the first time, and then Brady took it, and then Manning took it back again for the last time. I think the fact that over the last 30 years or however many, it's only been broken 3 times, that speaks to how difficult it is, and obviously the higher it goes, the more difficult it becomes to break. So his career passing yards gone, career passing touchdowns gone. I think this one could stand for quite a while.
You remember all those receivers and tight ends were fighting over that week.
Oh yeah,
who was going
to
get it? Yeah. Decker, DT, those guys had all kind of jostled for it, and it went to Julius Thomas.
Yeah, he almost threw that thing into the stands or something. He was dancing afterward. He thought it was all about him. So how about some that weren't on all of our lists, and starting with Mr. B and Champ Bailey going in?
Yeah, it's been a tough year, obviously. Mr. B passes away after he's elected to the Hall of Fame, but before he's enshrined. But to see him go into Canton this year with one of his favorite players in Champ Bailey, the thousands of Broncos fans that showed up to Canton to celebrate him, everything he's meant to the Broncos, to the game, to the Denver community, it was touching. It was something that I don't know that we'll see replicated, even as Peyton Manning goes into the Hall of Fame, some of these other players go in. It was just a really cool thing to be a part of. I know we were all there, and that just stands out to me as something that for years people have been talking about. Mr. Bolin needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and for it to finally happen was pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was a cool moment. Huh?
Yeah, well, Joe Ellis said, to Eric's point, he cared more about getting guys in than getting himself in, and I think that you're going to see for the next couple of years guys like Peyton Manning, Von Miller possibly when he retired, he's probably got a couple more years, but
Steve Atwater.
Carl Mecklenburg, Randy Gradishar, these are all guys that he felt strongly should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and it was a good decade for the Broncos in Canton. You're talking about guys, Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp, so a good year for the Broncos in Canton overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think Floyd Little too.
Floyd Little.
Finally some representation for the Broncos that had been lacking for so long, but I mean, Champ was the first defensive player to play for the Broncos that ended up in the Hall of Fame. Kind of ridiculous.
It is.
And so for him to go in with Mr. B was kind of fitting, and not to take away from any of those other guys, but to get 2 Broncos in the same year.
Special moment. It was definitely
awesome.
a special moment. Last one to talk about here, John Elway coming back to the organization. That was a rocky time for the Denver Broncos coming off the 2 Josh McDaniels years, and then Elway brings the stability and a tradition of winning back to the organization.
It's funny because you look back on that press conference and Mr. Bolin turns to John and says, maybe one day you'll be saying this one for Pat.
Yep.
And he actually did it in 2015. So I thought it was a cool full circle moment to see John back with the organization. And God, when he said this one's for Pat, when they finally did win it, just chills. I mean, that was one of the biggest moments of the decade.
Yeah, and not a bad first draft pick for John Elway, of course. Able to take Von Miller. He's been better than advertised as well. And I think what's impressive about John is that obviously he built that first team, the Super Bowl 50 team, and now he's kind of building the Broncos back. We've had 2 really impressive draft classes the last couple years, a chance to stack another one, and so I think it speaks a little bit about a GM, a president of football ops, if they're able to do it once. If he can get the Broncos back, and it does seem like they're starting to turn the corner, that speaks again to the job he's been able to do there. It's
been a great decade for the Broncos. These are just 5 moments from each of us to highlight really what was a tremendous 10-year stretch.
509 didn't even make the list.
Yeah,
that's how crazy the decade was.
There's so many. I mean, like we said with the players, there's so many moments that we're leaving off the list because you only have so many spots.
Yep. Well, it's been a great decade, but just our opinions here. For Eric Dalala, Matt Boyer, I am Phil Milani. Hope you have a happy New Year.